In this video, you will receive information on voter suppression from renowned voter fraud investigator Greg Palast. He will reveal to you how voter suppression affected the 2024 election. Voter suppression refers to any legal or systematic attempt to prevent eligible citizens from exercising their right to vote. It can take many forms, including restrictive voter ID laws, purging voter rolls, dumping provisional ballots, not counting mail-in ballots, limited access to polling places, and reductions in early voting or mail-in ballots. These practices disproportionately affect marginalized groups, including people of color, low-income individuals, the elderly, and young voters. Voter suppression undermines the foundational principle of democracy by making it more difficult for certain populations to participate in elections, often skewing outcomes and eroding trust in the political system. Raising awareness about these tactics is crucial for safeguarding the right to vote and ensuring fair representation for all citizens. Safeguarding your rights is what we are talking about in this four-part series. You need to check and see if your vote has been counted. Chances are that if you did a mail-in ballot or provisional ballot, your vote was not counted. Chances are it was dumped. Don't forget to subscribe to the Webmasters Podcast channel to receive the next 3 parts to this series on voter suppression and how it affects people of color.
The tried and true way to suppress the people's voice is by making it harder for them to vote. And voter suppression has been taken to a high art in many of these states, like Georgia, for example, is just probably head of that parade. And when it comes to talking about that and the ways in which voter rolls are shed of Democratic voters in this case, that's the, as I say, tried and true, baked in way that you can, conspiracy theorists, you can sink your teeth into a narrative. And the guy who is without peer when it comes to bringing light to voter suppression, the aggressive shedding of voters from the voter rolls, is this guy right here. So glad we got him. Love his books. I love his reporting. I love his latest movie. How about it for Greg Palast, everybody? Greg, what a week you had. I know you were really doing some real-time reporting on what was happening with voter disenfranchisement. Can you give us an update, on what happened a bit? Just bring us up to speed, and then where that all stands now.
Well, Mark, it involves millions of voters. I mean, I don't think we understand in America how much what we politely call vote suppression, which is a fancy word for saying screwing people of color out of their vote, which is what it really comes down to. So, and I'm talking millions of votes. You know, for those who don't know me, Greg Palast, I'm a reporter for BBC Television and the Guardian newspapers out of England. One thing we do in BBC is that when we announce the vote, we say so many, 1,000 votes for Labor, 1,000 votes for Conservatives, and then we say how many votes weren't counted. Well, we don't do that in America for good reason, because the number of votes we don't counted is in the million. Now, we have an organization called True the Vote, which is backed by Donald Trump. They did the film 2000 Mules. He released it from Mar-a-Lago. He's been a big promoter of their work. But what people don't know is their main work is to challenge the right of voters to vote. Now, this may sound odd, but in America, unlike every other developed country in the world, anyone can challenge the vote of someone else in 43 states. This is left over from Jim Crow. So for example, in Georgia, we had one single woman, a Republican operative working for Marjorie Taylor Greene. One single woman challenged 32,000 voters. Another Republican official is the Republican chairman for in southern Georgia, a guy named Alton Russell. He personally challenged 4,000 voters. Now, who are these voters? Almost all of them were black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia, where he's chairman of the Republican Party there. One is named Gamaliel Turner, Major Gamaliel Turner. Now, Major Turner was waiting for his vote. He was assigned to a base in California. There he is at Fort Hueneme in front of one of the jets there. He was assigned. He's 70 years old, career military, African American, and he was assigned to California. And so this Republican Party operative challenged his vote and 4,000 others, almost all of them black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia. This is no joke. Now you'd say, well, okay, that's a few votes. No, it ain't. True the Vote, as of August 5th, had already challenged 852,000 citizens. Now, these aren't government officials that are doing the challenging. These are individual vigilantes, self-proclaimed vote fraud hunters.
And this is
and
your
they
point.
Took they challenged all together by election day. They challenged, as my producer Martin Sheen says, they challenged 2 million voters. This has not been reported on. The New York Times, Washington Post did some little stories about, oh yeah, there's these challenges there. If you're watching this on your, not just listening, but there is a woman in a red dress, Republican Party official, who personally challenged 32,000 people. I'm showing her a photo of a black woman, a neighbor of hers, who she challenged, 32,379 voters. That's just the beginning.
And so it's perfectly legal. Yeah. And that the way we're set up, that's perfectly legal. That one person.
It may be legal. I mean, according to the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, the president of the NAACP, is in my film. So that's just one way. 2 million voters were challenged. 2 million, almost all of them voters of color.
But explain to us, Greg Palast, what happens. So they're challenged. How do they end up in a trash heap?
Well, this is what happened. Okay, first of all, you have to understand, you think, well, what the hell is this? These people aren't government officials. Who are they to challenge voters? Well, we have leftover Jim Crow laws. Last time this mass challenge of voters occurred was 1946. 1946, that's more than a half century ago, when the Ku Klux Klan mounted a challenge of almost all the black voters of Georgia, and they elected a Klansman as governor. Now, here's the interesting thing. At that time, in 46, the Justice Department and the FBI moved to indict the governor of Georgia, who had won his election. He was a Klansman who won through this trickery of challenging voters. And they were about to arrest him, but he drank himself to death just before the FBI arrived to handcuff him. Now, here's the weird thing. That was 1946. It was considered illegal by the Justice Department in 1946, and yet the 1946 Klan plan became the Trump plan of 2024, and nothing has happened to stop this. That's just one of the ways that vote suppression has worked here, and I'm telling you, that was 2 million votes. Now, what happens when you are challenged? Either you walk away and say, well, I don't have the right to vote. You show up to vote. And by the way, if you've mailed in your ballot, it won't get counted. About 60, I want to emphasize this. This is not small. About 60% of the American public votes early or by mail. Over half the American population votes that way. You mail in your vote and you've been challenged by a vigilante, you won't know it and your vote goes in the garbage. If you show up to vote, they may hand you something that they call a provisional ballot. Now, what is a provisional ballot? I call it a placebo ballot. The lady behind the desk says, oh, just fill out this form and your ballot will count. And they'll go through it, find your registration, your ballot will count. No, it won't. If you're not on the registration rolls, you're not on the registration rolls, and you can fill out 92 provisional ballots. They won't count. They won't count.
I did not know that. That's extraordinary. I've had that happen. I've filled it out where they didn't because of some glitch in the system. Because I've changed residency.
Your vote didn't count. Your vote went in the garbage, my friend. So here's what happens. With a provisional ballot. According to the United States Elections Assistance Commission, which is our federal agency which tracks these things, 4 years ago, there were 10 million people shunted to provisional ballots. 10 million.